The World Cup is over. That means one thing. Arsenal. It's time to talk about squad building, transfers, what the team might look like next year, where the gaps in the squad are. I thought the best way to show gaps in the squad would be to pull up a tactics board with each player in each position that they play in. And the little green bar that you see at the bottom of a lot of these positions is the total number of minutes available for this position in the league. So you can see between Martinelli and Trossard, they got about 80% coverage on that position on left wing, which makes sense because sometimes Madueke played over there, or sometimes Saka might have played over there, right? It's also important to highlight the goals and assists that position contributed. So between Trossard and Martinelli, we got 7 goals and 10 assists in the league. But we know already that Trossard's gone. He's going to Besiktas, not coming back. We also know a player like Jesus probably does not fit into the team next year. The future of Nwaneri is a bit unclear. Skelly might move into midfield. So some things are starting to rearrange and change in the squad, even with the players that we already have. Norgard may be potentially likely to go as well. So we shuffle some players around, and you can see the squad actually has pretty decent coverage across the board. Huge gap on left wing, though, which is what everyone's talking about. Arsenal need a left winger. We also might need to get another central defender. With Saliba, with a long-term back injury following the World Cup, we might want a little bit of additional coverage here. And so we won't go into depth on that today, but it's another position we might look at in the future. And we're going to think about which players could bring the best value to the left wing, helping the squad get more output. So this lineup here in the league produced about 57.7 goals and 44.8 assists. Let's go by XG. So almost 60 XG and 40 expected assists. If we bring in a player like Vinicius Jr. to fill the gap that Trossard left, immediately you'll see a huge jump here. 71.5 XG, 45.5 expected assists, because Vinicius is an output player. It's unlikely we're going to get him, but I just wanted to highlight how this system works before we dive in any deeper. The name on everyone's lips right now is Morgan Rodgers. Unfortunately, he went to Chelsea. He also would have been a player who maybe could contribute on the left wing, give us some output, maybe could have dropped into midfield to provide some cover for other players in that position. But he's not going to be our player, so it's nice to look at what might have been, but we're not going to add him to the team. Instead, what we're going to do is look at Morgan Rodgers, and we're going to look at left wingers. We're going to look at their scouting profiles and see who's comparable that we might be able to get, or maybe we don't need to get anyone at all. The first player I want to look at is Eze. This is a player we already have in the squad who turns out, when you actually match him up against Morgan Rodgers in a 1v1, comparing their statistics side by side is pretty darn similar, right? A lot of these statistics like goals, assists, XG, XA, shots, headed goals, right? All these numbers are actually pretty close between the two players. And if we pull up something like the radar here, you'll see, oh, dang, look at that. They're actually pretty darn similar. A little bit more on the key passes and chances created for Morgan Rodgers than Eze, but maybe a more similar profile than you would have thought. Midfield radar, similar as well. Defensive radar, not too dissimilar as well, right? So these are two players that are actually more similar than we thought, but we paid 60 million for Eze versus 120 million pounds for Morgan Rodgers. But we already have Eze, and he already maybe plays on the left wing or in a position similar to Morgan Rodgers. Let's look at another profile that we've been linked with. Let's look at Bruno Guimaraes. This is a player Arsenal might purchase from Newcastle that I think is actually going to show up, again, very similarly on the radar, right? A few years older than Morgan Rodgers, so hopefully a bit cheaper. But you can see right away on the attacking profile, fairly similar. If anything, it might even be that, Bruno is a little bit more of a creative team player than Morgan Rodgers. When you flip to the midfield profile, much more well-rounded, involved with the rest of the team. Defensive engagements as well. Bruno outshines Morgan Rodgers. So yes, older player, but you can see why Arsenal would be thinking, maybe we miss out on Morgan Rodgers, an attacking midfielder like Bruno Guimaraes, who also can do some defensive work, might be a good option for about half the price. So those are a couple of profiles for Morgan Rodgers that we might already have at home in Eze, or we might be able to get in the market with Bruno. But what we really care about is the left wing, right? So the first thing I want to do is just highlight Christos Solis, right? And this guy is an attacking machine, right? He plays on the wing, kind of attacking midfield, not quite the same as Morgan Rodgers. But if you compare him per 90, this guy is basically top of his class. He maxes out every metric, breaks the league effectively in these attacking metrics. And that shows up here in his overall scouting profile, where you see this guy has 21 stats in the 90th percentile, right? Almost half an expected goal per 90, half an assist per 90. Now, look, I'm not stupid. He plays in the Belgian league. We need to take this all with a huge grain of salt. But if you were to even, say his output will half next season when he makes the transition, I would still take 8 to 9 goals, 11, 12 assists a season from Christos Solis for £30 million, or about 40 million euros. So I think he could be a huge kind of gap filler on the left wing for us, but he's also not that super flashy signing that some of us have in mind. So let's take a look at a few of those right now. Bradley Barcolaw's one of the ones that's at the top of everyone's mind. Plays on the left wing for PSG. In 1,700 minutes up here, got about 12 goal involvements. So that's almost, one every 120 minutes or so when he's on the field. Very engaged, good XG, good XA, but also does a decent amount in possession and dribbling and ball recovery. So let's maybe compare him to someone like, let's pull up Leandro Trossard here. Let's see if we can find him. Compare him to who we're losing, right? So you can see that Trossard really not quite the same player in terms of output as Bradley Barcola. Then we look at the midfield profile. Again, other than assists, Barcola is kind of across the board outperforming Trossard. So if we're looking at a one-to-one comparison here, Trossard out, Barcola in. Yes, he's coming from PSG, weaker league as well. But I think there's a lot to like for him to come in and replace Leandro Trossard. Let's move that along and then maybe do a couple more comparisons here. So let's say we want to compare him to, who else are we looking at? Let me see if I have Diomandé. Let's pull up Diomandé, who's, kind of talk of the town for RB Leipzig right now. And let's pull up the radar here. You can again see, Diomandé's doing a lot in terms of the XA and the chances created. Not quite as much on output yet. Again, many years younger in a different league. The midfield profile actually looks, fairly similar between the two players. So you can see where, we're linked with Bradley Barcola on the left wing, but we might also consider a player like Diomandé, who's a bit younger, doesn't quite play at the same level, but still shows up really nicely on the statistics. And maybe just for fun, let's do a couple more comparisons here. Let's compare him to, let's see if we can find Kvicha here. So Kvicha, I think a lot of people would say this guy's, between him and Vinny, the best left winger in the world. He's not coming to Arsenal, obviously, but you can see, not actually that incredibly different. They're both, kind of well into the 90th percentile, 80th percentile in attacking and midfield metrics. They're not wildly different. So it's not like, you get Barcola and you're getting a guy who's totally incomparable to someone like Kvaratskhelia. So anyways, let's bring it back here, right? We have a few options we can fill this left wing with. I think, one of the most common names is Bradley Barcola. We could bring him into the team. We also, and right away, 11 more goals, 1 more assist, so we can bring the XG and the XA up with a player like him. He didn't play a lot for PSG last season, so you could see a world where maybe, Christos Solis comes in as well, and between the three of them, they kind of fill up that position this season. Martinelli might get sold, might get phased out, so we can maybe even say, you know what, Martinelli, maybe we sell him. We have Barcola and Solis to cover the position, and we're still actually in a really good position in terms of output between those two. Again, with the asterisk that Solis is coming from the Belgian league. Anyways, I hope this was interesting, insightful, show you some different options for the left wing, talk about, compare statistical profiles between Morgan Rodgers, the player we missed out on, as well as, the players we have at home or players that are, we're looking at in the market like Bruno Guimaraes. I think a lot is still to happen in the defensive areas of the team, which I might come back and talk about later. But overall, I wanted to show, other than that left wing, we're in a decent position for coverage. And on that left wing, there are a few options that are interesting. And I think, even in the price range of 100 to 130 million for someone like Barcola is not unreasonable, considering, you'd be comparing him to players like Kvaratskhelia or Vinny Jr., who he profiles fairly well against in the data. Anyways, go Gunners.